Star Wars Battlefront 2 is having a bit of a renaissance. It is picking up steam on, well, Steam of all platforms, but I would imagine the consoles are doing well as well. Now, I'm not one to complain about player counts. Usually I'll say if a game has more than 2 players, it's probably going to be playable, but it's always unique to me when a game actually gains player counts after being inactive for a couple of years, and this can lead to some really cool stuff. For example, The Division 2 getting a new expansion several years after its last one. Battlefront 2 picking up steam here is kind of odd to me because I'm not sure why it is, but I'm glad it's happening. Let's talk about why the game struggled and also why the game is starting to get back to interesting spot and where I think it goes from here. To begin, we got to talk about Battlefront 2015. This was EA and DICE's take on the Battlefront games. If you never played the original 2 Battlefront games, which we'll be referring to as the classics, so we'll say classic Battlefront here. Love reboots. These games are considered timeless. Now, I personally find that they have their issues. There are some things in there that I'm not too particularly fond of, and I'm not ever really looking to replay those games all that much, but I enjoyed them as a kid. Seems to be about the consensus. I also find that there was not a lot of great Star Wars multiplayer games around this time. You had Battlefront 1, Battlefront 2, the Jedi Knight games, which were just really floaty, and if you weren't using lightsabers, that was kind of the end of the line for you. There was Republic Commando, which I thought was incredibly fun, but I don't think it ever really got the player counts it needed to stick around. I might be missing some stuff, but Star Wars actually had kind of a rough go of things around the late 2000s. It felt like the franchise was really stagnated, and despite what people will say about Star Wars 1313, I don't really think that was going to be the pickup it needed. Ironically, getting bought by Disney ended up being one of the biggest things to happen to Star Wars, for better or for worse. And along with that came an exclusive license to EA to produce Star Wars games. EA got it, no one else could make them. Surely nothing will go wrong. Well, things did go wrong. We start with Battlefront 2015, the reboot made by DICE themselves. And what they did was they took Battlefront and they wanted to put a spin on it to make it feel a little bit more arcadey and not so Battlefield-esque. Now, me personally, I like Battlefield games. I like the thought of a Star Wars Battlefield clone, especially because the original Battlefront games were pretty much just Battlefield clones. And while graphically speaking, the reboot, Battlefront 2015, did stun, it was kind of just there. The game did not really land with critics or consumers. It sold well, I'm sure. The thing everybody remembers was heroes versus villains, but for the most part, the actual game itself, while some really, really outstanding eye candy, didn't have a lot of content. It stuck to the original trilogy, which felt like a really odd choice, especially because we were about to go into a whole new realm of Star Wars with the sequel trilogy, which, yes, in retrospect sounds silly, but back then, man, it was the frontier. We were excited. So there was room for improvement, to say the least. So imagine everyone's excitement when we get Star Wars Battlefront 2 2017 announced. That's pretty fast. That's a pretty quick turnaround time, especially because DICE had just put out Battlefront. I'm going to do that so many times. Battlefield 1. With Battlefront 2, they came out swinging. We got the prequel trilogy. We got a campaign. We got sequel trilogy on the horizon. We got a lot of content. The game seemed to be listening. Well, as these things tend to go, yeah, they heard, but they certainly didn't listen. Similar to Destiny 2, which the first game was derided for not having a more traditional campaign, Battlefront 2015 was also derided for not having said campaign. Battlefront 2 said, hey, we have a campaign. Check this out. And to say it was lackluster is being generous. It was really just like nothing we hadn't seen before in the Star Wars realm, but that's okay. It didn't have to be much, right? It was something for people who didn't want to play multiplayer to play, which, once again, I'll always say I would rather not have a campaign in a multiplayer-centric game if the campaign is just going to be an ass pool, but people on Reddit seem to disagree with me, so surely they're always right. So as the game was starting to go through its beta trials, people said, hey, EA, the loot boxes kind of seems like that's gonna be the progression system of the game. And EA was like, yeah. So yeah, the progression of Battlefront 2 was revealed to be pretty much strictly through loot boxes that could be purchased with in-game currency, but really, let's be honest here, it's money. Swipe, please. Turns out people don't really like having to pay a lot more money for their $60 game. Once again, where have I seen this one before? Then it all comes to a head with the most downvoted Reddit comment in the entire history of Reddit. During an AMA, which if you're a big corporation that people don't like, don't do an AMA. Someone said, hey, can you tell me why Darth Vader is going to take like 40 hours of grinding to be able to unlock? Because unless you want to swipe the credit card, that's how long it took. And EA said, and I quote here, they wanted to make sure that they made people use credits to unlock heroes to give them a sense of pride and accomplishment, which is now considered a meme because guess what? It destroyed the reception of this game. Day before release, EA turned off microtransactions because they were like, hey, that's a bad idea. Ended up being so hated that governments got involved. And this is what essentially ended the entire loot box economy in gaming for a very long time, which is also why I'm not really thrilled that Overwatch is bringing it back as like a nostalgia thing. I'm very against this. Loot boxes are inherently predatory. There is not a good system that uses loot boxes unless it is something that is purely built in-game for use in-game with in-game currency. Something like Xenoblade Chronicles 2, for example. Needless to say, EA did it bad. They did an oopsie. Now, as these things tend to go, post-launch content was expected to fix things, because by the time we were in 2017, that was kind of the expectation. First off, the game did not feature a traditional season pass, which was on its way out around this time, instead going into the seasonal model. Yay, hey, that's pretty nice. As the Star Wars movies released, we got different content related to them, different characters, maps, until in 2020, we got the last major update, which included a very nice co-op mode that I'll talk about later. So the game ended up with a lot more content than I think anybody was ever planning for it to have. I think the actual gameplay as well never really got discussed because it was all just overshadowed by some really legendary poor decisions. Well, enough about the bad stuff. Why are people playing the game now? That's great. Let's talk about it. First of all, tell me if this sounds cool to you. Battlefield, but with Star Wars. Sounds pretty good, right? And I don't mean Battlefield 2042, I'm talking Battlefield 4. Now let me do you one better. What if I told you that the game has a third-person mode as well as a first-person mode, but you're going to want to play in first person because it just makes everything so much more immersive and cinematic. When I say cinematic, I don't use that term lightly. I do not throw that around. It's a buzzword, and I generally don't like it, but this game, and especially the graphical work that it is doing, deserves that title. There is some movie-ass stuff happening in this game. It is very, very impressive. On top of that, too, this is a game that released in 2017 and looks better than a lot of things coming out on Unreal Engine 5 now. Maybe that's the state of development these days. Maybe it's just harder than we realize, but I don't know. I think it says something that an 8-year-old game that looks this good and has this level of detail runs so well on what is my admittedly aging system that I'm going to have to take out back and Lassie at some point because I'm running a 2060. I don't want to buy a 40 series. The game being content-rich and being pretty to look at doesn't really matter if it's not fun to play. And something I mentioned earlier is I don't really like the floaty feel older Star Wars multiplayer games gave me. I preferred the more grounded, more infantry-based, more almost realistic. I hesitate to use that word because it's Star Wars, it's space magic, but almost realistic gameplay, something that you might find in Republic Commando. We didn't really get that experience again until the Battlefront games came back. Specifically, Battlefront 2 really captures that wonderful wartime feeling. Something like Helldivers 2 is a really good comparison of just how much stuff is flying around. You've got music blaring in your ear, people stomping around, blasters going left, right, center, large vehicles screaming over your head, jumping up and down around you, different heroes. It just feels good. It feels cool. I won't tell you that this is the most competitive multiplayer game ever. In fact, I don't really think that that's what it's trying to do. Just like how I don't think games like Counter-Strike 2 and Rainbow Six Siege should really be trying to appeal too hard to casual demographics. I think a game like Star Wars Battlefront 2, or really any of the Battlefield games, shouldn't be trying to appeal to the hyper-competitive demographic because the games just don't intersect. They don't have that kind of magic to them. Where Battlefield and Battlefront live well is when a lot of stuff is happening and there's a lot of chaos, a lot of entropy. Battlefront 2 does this really well, especially because since it came out, we got stuff like Battlefield 5 and Battlefield 2042 that don't really get the core of the franchise anymore. So ironically, Battlefront 2 ends up being the last great Battlefield game released. You've also got this really interesting card system that allows you to level up characters, allows you to kind of do some build crafting. I hesitate to use that word because there's a pretty defined meta. The game's been out for a long time. But hey, you know what? It's fun to experiment. It's fun to make heroes feel a little different. I like the vehicle combat feels great as well. This was worked on by Criterion Games, who did so well, they got their own vehicle-based Star Wars game. Good job to them. Lastly, I want to talk about the co-op mode. Now, something that a lot of people in their 30s who have kids will probably tell you is they are scared of competitive multiplayer games, even if they're more on the casual side. Because playing against other players who might have more time than you is pretty difficult. And while I'll always say, I think you should do hard things, I can sympathize some days. Some days you really just don't have the brain power for that. And this co-op mode allows you to live out this chaos, live out this power fantasy of being in the Star Wars universe and mowing down enemies, while also building up experience towards making your gear better. And it's all PvE, buddy. You want to play with those heroes, you want to play with those cool units, this is where you do it. I think it's a really great idea, and I think as long as it stays in somewhat of an active state, you'll always have something to do in the game. I think Star Wars Month being in May helped this whole thing. But I think what helps it more is the fact that Battlefront 2 did become a genuinely good game after a good amount of time. I really like these comeback stories. I really like to see games get to shine again. And even though it's probably not going to hit crazy Rivals numbers, I think it's going to end up doing really well. What about the future? Is there a Battlefront 3? Well, unfortunately, just like I would say with Destiny 3, I just don't foresee that happening, because typically when this kind of stuff happens, you start developing far in advance. In order for a Battlefront 3 to be on the horizon, they probably would have had to start development right after Battlefield 2042, and I don't believe that is what's happening. I believe we're witnessing whatever Battlefield 6 is going to be happening in real time, and truth be told, I don't know if it's going to be the return to form that we want, but what I think could be cool is what if we keep adding on to Battlefront 2? Hear me out. We've had a lot of really cool Disney Plus stuff come out. Andor, Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian, Kenobi. Not everybody liked Kenobi, but I like Ewan McGregor, so I liked Kenobi. Why don't we start putting this stuff in Battlefront 2? Why don't we use Battlefront 2 as a platform to continue building? The game already looks next-gen. It already feels next-gen. You can give it a next-gen update for the new consoles. You can make this work. Why build out a whole new game when you already have a functioning one? Come back to it. Dust it off. I don't know if this will happen. I don't know how realistic it is to ask. But if this game were to have a future, like a genuinely strong future, that's where I would say to go. Why build a new game? Why not just build on what you got? I'm really, really happy to see this game thriving. Is this game for you? If you like big, chaotic, Star Wars immersive style combat, and I do mean immersive. I mean, you've got mud and scorch marks building up on stormtrooper armor. You've got particles flying everywhere. It's wonderful. This game will be for you if you want all that. If you're kind of over Star Wars, if you're not really into the idea of having to grind some co-op to get your character to work better, or you're just not really into the large-scale, sprawling mess that is a Battlefield-style game, you might want to pass. But the game is on sale often enough, or is always on Game Pass now, that you can give it a shot for a pretty reasonable price at this rate. While we're here, why don't you tell me about some games that you want to see make a comeback? Things that maybe weren't doing so well player count-wise could come back and could be rebuilt. I'm talking stuff like Battlefront 2, Division 2, I don't know, competitive Glover. Leave it in the comments below. Thanks for watching.